We are Eliza,
Lori,
and Brenna,
and this is Crime Feast.
Each week we serve up a platter of murders,
mayhem, missing persons, tragedies, and more.
Feast on notorious tales,
ripped from today's headlines,
and resurrected from the past.
This is Eliza, and I'm serving up our crime story today. I have Lori and Brenna here with me to help me dissect the details.
Hey!
We're excited to hear about today's case.
On this episode, I'm talking about the kidnapping and subsequent brutal murder of two young girls that shocked not only the local community where I grew up, but the entire nation. It's the 1975 case of Katherine and Shiela Lyon, young sisters aged 10 and 12, who vanished after a trip to the mall. It's super scary.
Worst nightmare.
Every parent's worst nightmare.
Seriously, I know my kids want to go walk around the mall with their friends, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea. So the girls were from Montgomery County, Maryland, and lived in Kensington, about a half mile from Wheaton Plaza, which is a shopping center that has been subsequently renamed Westfield Wheaton in Wheaton, Maryland. On Tuesday, March 25th, 1975, the girls were on their spring break from school and decided they wanted to go to the mall to look at some Easter exhibits and then have lunch at a pizza place. Their mom told them to be home by 4, gave them some money for lunch, and the two sisters walked down the street towards the mall. It was probably about half mile or so. At this time, the area was pretty safe with little crime, and it was common for kids to walk down to the mall and have some fun. Sort of different from today, where we're all like, no way, you're not walking a mile to the mall. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, when we were younger, we all did that, right? We're like, okay, I'm taking off to the mall with my friends and
right back. I used to walk like 2 miles to work on a busy street that was like a highway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I used to go places all the time, and my parents never even knew where I was.
That too.
Right. Like, you'd be like, see you at dinner.
Yeah.
Just leave.
Yeah.
Nowadays, not so much. So, like, literally, my youngest is, like, I just started letting her walk to the bus stop by herself, and it's, like, 2 doors down. And I still stand on the front porch and watch her. So, and she's older than the Lyon sisters were at this time. Like, I just can't even imagine, but it is the way it was back then. So,
yeah.
When 4 p.m. rolled around, the sisters did not return home. Their mom was sort of irritated by this because they obviously didn't listen to her about when to be home, but she still expected them to return, didn't think anything of them being late other than just, they didn't listen to me. Their older brother had also been to the mall that day, and he had seen the girls eating pizza around 2 p.m., so the mom was reassured, like, they were at the mall, they were there, they saw their brother, they were doing what they said they were going to do, they're just running late.
That would make me feel better.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
So by 7, the girls have missed dinner, which has never happened before. They've been out, I guess, more than once and never are late for dinner. And so now the parents are starting to get, like, worried because this isn't just a case of, like, them being, like, a little bit late. Like, this is 3 hours late. And they've never done this before. They didn't try calling or anything. So the parents are worried, and they call the police.
I'd be super worried.
I would be too. Yeah.
Right, same. I'd be freaking out. They go to the mall. The girls are not anywhere to be seen. They're not anywhere to be found between the mall and their house. The last sighting was allegedly from a friend of theirs who saw them at the mall talking to an older man with a briefcase. And the briefcase held a tape recorder and a microphone.
Weird.
That is.
And I guess he was, like, trying to get girls to, like, he was, like, interviewing girls and, like, recording them, which is also kind of super creepy. And it reminds me, actually, it's so weird. Do you remember when you were a teenager, like, walking around the mall and there'd be, like, these random people that would be like, oh, we have a modeling agency. And you'd be, like, perfect for the modeling agency. You should come by our office.
Yeah, I think a lot of serial killers have used that line.
I know, right?
Super creepy. Like, that's kind of what it
like,
reminded me of.
Like, run. Just run.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
For sure. Seriously, run now. Like, if anyone approaches you, especially with a tape recorder, get out of there. So they spoke to some of the friends that the girls saw at the mall, and one of them identified a young man in his late teens, possibly early 20s. He had really long, kind of greasy hair, acne. He was dressed really dingy and, like, grungy clothes, and apparently had been staring at the girls, like, super hardcore and with, like, this creepy expression, apparently, for quite a while. And it was bad enough that the friend actually confronted the man, like, why are you staring at us? Like, go away. And he was different from the older gentleman with the microphone. So now you've kind of got, like, 2 creepers, possibly.
What's up with this mall?
Right? Seriously. I got a side note about that in a little bit, too. Their father actually at the time happened to be a pretty popular radio announcer. So he goes on his station and he's pleading for help to find the girls. The photos of the two girls were circulated everywhere. 12-year-old Sheila with her blonde pigtails and glasses. 10-year-old Kate with her short blonde cut.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like school photos. They're super cute. We'll put those up on our social media for everyone to see, too. So search parties combed the entire area for weeks. The woods, storm drains, vacant houses, ponds, like anywhere that someone might have,
I can't imagine,
fallen and gotten hurt or maybe been stashed. That sort of horrible thing, yeah. And obviously countless witness interviews, like their friends, but anyone who might have seen them at the mall, the people that worked at the pizza place. They also interviewed a ton of people from a nearby nursing home and sifted through a bunch of tips from there for people who might have seen the girls walking. Around the same time, an eyewitness from the mall named Lloyd Welch reported having seen a man talking to the girls at the mall and reported it and said it was like super creepy and it like weirded him out. And so he reported it to a mall guard.
Was it the same guy with the briefcase?
Yeah. So he was hooked up with the cops and he was just the way he was describing the person who was talking to the girls was a guy with a briefcase.
Okay.
The police took a statement, and they're finding the timing and the report to be a bit fishy. I mean, it's like almost a week later that he's finally come forward to say this. And at this time, the parents have put out, like, reward money. And so they're like, this guy is just making crap up. He's definitely heard on the, the news about the guy with the briefcase. He's totally making this up. Because they think he's just after the money and he looks kind of grungy, they're like...
Those people are the worst.
We're going to give him a lie detector test to see if he's, like, lying about his report. Of course he fails.
Yeah, of course.
Ooh.
Right? Such the worst. So he fails, and they're like, you liar, you're not getting the money, get out of here, and they disregard his report.
Ooh.
So then, in April, which is just like a couple weeks after the girls have gone missing, another witness report comes into police about seeing the two girls matching Sheila and Katherine's appearance in the back of a beige station wagon. So, of course, people are like, oh my gosh. And the witness got a partial plate and said the driver...
Why are people waiting so long?
I know. I guess the person driving saw that the person was, like, writing down their license plate and, like, ran a red light to take off and gone on a highway speeding towards Virginia. So now you've got, like, 2 states involved here, which I think becomes a little more complicated.
Oh, so they're heading my way.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Beware, Lori.
Not going to the malls around here either.
If it crosses state lines, it becomes like a federal issue too, right? So the feds can get involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, they like put this information out immediately on the radio. And volunteers like start searching for this car, like driving on the highway, looking for like a beige car with these numbers. But like even after doing all this, they come up empty-handed. Obviously, like with any case, like with the guy with the bad report, like you're gonna get so many like fake random people like making false reports, which is super sad because they have to follow up on everything and it just wastes their time. But then the parents were getting fake ransoms. Like people saying like, oh, I have your girls, give me $1,500, meet me at the courthouse. And, of course you don't want to like ignore that stuff because what if they actually do have your child? So like they actually would set up like the stuff. At one point the dad did drop off like a briefcase. It only had $101, not the $1,500, because at $101 it actually becomes like a felony versus anything less. And the person never came and picked up the case. So like obviously they just was a total fake out, which I don't understand why people think that's
horrible.
Like, why would you do that? Like, why do you make a false report, or why do you say like you want money for the kids and you don't have them? Like,
and it just gives all this false hope to the parents, thinking they're going to get their daughters back, and then they don't because it was all a hoax.
It really is awful.
It's just so messed up.
Yeah, it takes another type of evil person to do something like that to a family that's grieving and going through that trauma.
It's definitely evil. So, obviously, nothing's panned out so far, and there's been no other sightings besides that one car thing back in April. And 2 months after the girls have gone missing, the National Guard actually gets involved, and they participate in a search in a nearby forest. I mean, this case was, like, going crazy. Like, it was all over the news. People were...
But, yeah, it's shocking that, just walking to the mall, anybody is at risk. So I can see how it would grab the headlines and get the attention that it needed.
Just, it was unbelievable that this had happened in that area. Or anywhere. So here's something else I didn't realize, but I learned while watching the documentary Who Killed the Lyon Sisters. It's an Amazon Prime. And listening to the detectives that were talking in the video, they said that apparently it's more rare for a child to be kidnapped by a stranger than someone they know.
I've heard that before.
Which I didn't know. I just have always thought, oh my God, random strangers are snatching kids. And even more rare is for two girls to be stolen at once. So rare that it's an impossibility. So I think that's also why everyone was so shocked, because it was clearly a stranger that had done it.
It's pretty bold.
Two girls at one time, that's crazy. So I looked it up. According to the FBI, fewer than 350 people under the age of 21 are abducted by strangers in the U.S. every year since 2010. That seems really low, right?
High but low, yes.
It does. It seems low but also high at the same time, because you don't want anybody.
High but low,
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I thought it was 1,000, but it's still a lot. I was pretty shocked to hear that. I would have thought it was, like I said, thousands of people being stolen all the time. For context, it's nearly 7 times that number for children who are abducted by a non-custodial parent every year. So that's I guess how rare it is for a child to be taken. Less than 1% of missing children are actually taken by a stranger. So this is why everyone's so frantic, because it seems like these girls have just vanished into thin air. Nobody knows anything. The case is going nowhere. And you always think back to the first 24 hours, the first 48 hours. We're 2 months away. I just can't imagine how their parents are feeling.
It's devastating.
So because it was so rare for one kid to be stolen by a stranger, let alone two being pretty much impossible, they've determined that it must be more than one person colluding to have taken the girls. And the question of why they were taken is even more horrifying to think about, because the biggest reasons included sex trafficking ring or child pornography ring. Nothing good. There's no good reason.
Yeah,
it's all horrible.
Terrifying.
So here's a little side note about that area that I mentioned I was going to talk about earlier. My dad graduated from high school in 1975 in Montgomery County. I asked him while I was doing research on this case if he remembered this case. I didn't tell him anything about it. I was just do you remember the case of the Lyon sisters? He's oh, the 2 girls that were stolen from the mall. And I was oh my gosh, this is so long ago, and he still remembers it. And I think because 1975, he was I think he was 18 at the time that this case happened. And, it's a formidable part of his life. Anyways, it was on the nightly news for months. Everyone was talking about it. You couldn't go anywhere without anyone talking about it. You couldn't turn on TV without hearing about it. So it was definitely something that he had remembered. And he said that nothing literally had ever happened like that before anywhere. And it put such a panic in people. And the interesting thing is, I remember when I was growing up, my family, my friends, everyone did not go to that mall. They were that mall's horrible. It's so bad there. It's so dangerous. People get kidnapped from there all the time. So I just was totally fearful of it. And when I was 18, I had a summer job working at a doctor's office, actually in Wheaton. And my coworkers were let's go to lunch at Wheaton Plaza. And I was no, I will never go to lunch there. I'll get kidnapped. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And they were so confused. They were what? And I was no, it's a dangerous mall. And they're seriously, stop. We're just going to go get salads. And I was fine. Oh my gosh. And we went, and it was just a normal mall.
Right.
And I was just looks like the mall that's back in Gaithersburg too.
And that's what's so disturbing about this case, though, because it was just a normal mall.
Yeah.
A normal place where you would go and think you're safe.
Exactly.
And so you said that people are getting kidnapped from there all the time. But was it just these 2 sisters, and they had such an impact that everybody was people are always getting abducted from this mall?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I think there was some crime there, at any mall that you might find. I mean,
of course,
random stuff, probably drugs or shoplifting, stuff like that. But it wasn't a place to go and be abducted.
Yeah.
Not the thing that I had built in my brain at all.
It is funny how those things do make an impression, though, because recently here, I mean, I live in a very nice area in Northern Virginia, and at the Tyson's Corner Center Mall recently, there was a shooting in the mall. It was just 2 people with a disagreement, but it's such a nice mall. And now I think, I haven't been there since it happened, but I'm who else is in there? What's going to happen if I take my kids to the mall? And that was just like an isolated little incident.
Yeah.
We have the same thing here at the Columbia Mall. There was a huge shootout there that killed a lot of the store workers and patrons. And horrible. I still go to the mall because that's the good mall around here. And every time, like, I'm thinking, like, ooh, is today the day? I mean, I think that's sort of like a thing that we all think about everywhere now, though, which is really upsetting. Like, you go to the mall, you go to a concert, you go to school.
It's very sad that we have to think that. Yeah.
It's sad that we have to think that way.
Mm-hmm. It really is. Sorry about that little side note. Just thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Hey, Crime Feasters. Lori here. We're interrupting this case to let you know that Eliza and I host another weekly podcast.
We admit to an extreme love of history, books, and wine, and we couldn't help but share our obsession with everyone else.
And so, we created a place where we could talk about all three of those things at once. The History, Books, and Wine podcast.
Join us, and sometimes our guests, weekly for happy hour chats about books, fascinating historical tidbits, and what we're drinking.
Episodes this season include genealogy, naughty princesses, haunted history, scandals, and so much more.
Thank you for letting us share, and we hope to raise a glass to books and the past with you. Now, back to your feast. So the search for the sisters went on for months, and there was literally like no evidence pointing them in any certain direction, even though they had, a couple of witnesses seeing different things, with them talking with that guy with the briefcase, etc. But they don't know who the guy is. No one can identify him. Nothing is happening. And so the case goes cold, which is just equally devastating, I'm sure. Occasionally, cold case detectives, like over the years, would reopen the boxes, try to re-examine things. Maybe they missed something, like just sifting through everything, hoping that maybe something will pop out that they hadn't seen before. And obviously, like, as technology and science change, 1975 to today is a huge difference of what they might be able to do with evidence. They're searching through that, but there's still nothing coming up, nothing at all. It's just a cold case.
All those years that the parents are just grieving, but not really being able to grieve at the same time. Yeah.
And their siblings, too. You never know when they're going to... I mean, they even had, like, photos, like, this is what they looked like then, this is what they might look like now.
Yeah.
Just devastating. In 2013, almost 40 years after the girls have gone missing, another Montgomery County detective opens the cold case again, named Chris Comrock. He'd been working for the files for some time, pretty defeated, ready to give up, basically like everyone else in the decades before him. And then he stumbles across a file he says he didn't remember seeing before. And suddenly it's just there, like, right in front of him. And I don't know about you guys, but this happens to me a lot. Like, I'm looking for, like, my glasses, and then, like, they're right on my desk. I just didn't see them the whole time.
That happens quite often in my office, but I do clean up a lot just because I can't handle losing things. Yeah, I get it.
I lose things all the time.
Me too.
So he sits down and he's like, well, this is really strange. It felt like almost like the universe had been blocking him until this point, and then there's this file. Well, the file in front of him is a 6-page transcript of a statement made by Lloyd Welch. Remember that
I knew
grungy
he was
teenager
gonna
I told
come
you
back.
about?
It's always the
Of
people
course.
that insert themselves into the case.
I know.
Uh-huh. That's what they say, like that the like an arsonist or a serial killer or whatever, burglar.
Yeah.
They always go back.
Yeah, they'll always
Yes.
go back to the scene of the crime.
Yeah. Hello, Lloyd. Here we meet again, right? Detective Comrock pores over the statement, noticing at the end of it that Lloyd mentions the kidnapper had a limp. At this point in time, detectives had kind of determined that a possible suspect could have been a convicted pedophile named Ray Molesky. There were a few others that were considered. Fred Howard Coffey, he had been convicted of molestation and murder of a 10-year-old girl in North Carolina. But in 1975, he was interviewed and then hired for a job in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is right by Wheaton. And it was just a few days after the girls went missing, so obviously they're like, oh, this guy fits the mold, maybe he has something to do with it, but they were never able to find anything to connect him to the case, zero evidence, so they couldn't even do anything about it.
But they still had suspects. Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, John Crutchley, he was a serial kidnapper, rapist, and murderer. And I'm actually going to be talking about him on a future podcast, so I don't want to go too much into him, but he was living in the area and preying on victims during this time. Of course, again, zero evidence.
Wow, I'm thinking there's just a lot of creepy people in that area.
Yeah.
Super creepy. No wonder I didn't go to the malls. Stay away from the mall. That brings us to the third suspect that I mentioned earlier, Ray Molesky, who lived near the mall where the man was reported carrying the creepy suitcase with the microphone, talking to little girls. He's also a known pedophile. In 1977, he murdered his wife and son and wounded another son. Informants at prison said he knew and talked about the Lyon case. And guess what? He also had a limp, which Lloyd Welch had said the guy has a limp.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's kind of a connection here.
Yeah.
Montgomery County detectives are trying to find Lloyd. They're having a really hard time finding him. Turns out that he's actually in jail, and he's been there for a while. Welch was given 33-year prison sentence for, guess what?
Murder.
Molesting a 10-year-old girl.
Ugh.
Coincidence.
Gross.
So gross. His rap sheet was a mile long. Multiple larcenies, burglaries, assaults, public drunkenness, more than one sexual assault on a minor. He's just like a filthy human.
All these red flags. He's awful.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Right? Seriously. In the 70s, Welch had been traveling carnival worker. When they looked back through unsolved missing children's cases, there were a number of hits that lined up with the trips for the carnival that he had been on. They don't have enough evidence to even deal with that, and they're working on the Lyon case. So all these coincidences keep piling up with this guy, and they basically have two things they need to get out of him. And that is, one, to identify Molesky, who they think is the guy with the briefcase, and to find out if Lloyd was involved. Because remember, they think that it had to have been more than one person to get these two girls.
Oh, that's right. You said that.
So they think they were working together?
Yeah, possibly. It's so difficult when you're working with criminals, especially like horrible ones like this. Like, they're liars, you know? Like, and so they have to be super careful when they're investigating and interviewing, because they don't want to set them off and make them not say anything. Like, ultimately, they want to find out what happened to these girls so they can give their parents, who happen to still be alive, some closure.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Detective Hamrock, along with Detective Davis and the Montgomery County Deputy State's Attorney, hop in their car and travel from Maryland to Delaware, where he is imprisoned. And Welch comes into the room wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking really rough. We can also show a picture of that on our social media. He looks scary. So there's something about his eyes that just says evil. Like, you know when you can look into someone's eyes and you're like, ooh, you give me the creeps.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they've got that coldness.
Oh,
and that,
yeah. Like, there's
like those
no
dead
humanity
eyes.
there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The first things he says to detective is, I know why you're here. You're here about those two missing kids.
Oh, I just got chills.
Cops are like, we have to keep a straight face here because we don't want to, like, make him think that we're here to, like, charge him. Right, exactly.
Give away our hands.
So also, how the hell did he know that they were there for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, like, guilty sirens have to be going off all over the place. And honestly, like, I don't even know how detectives, like, they must have so much patience, because my immediate thing would, I would be, like, shouting, like, hook him, charge him right now. Like, he's guilty. He's guilty.
Yeah.
I don't have patience for questions. Like, even with my kids, I come right out and get to the point.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have
Same.
a lot of training and self-control to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. For real. Obviously, they're having to play the long game, and it's already been 40 years, so a few more months of trying to really dig in carefully is not going to hurt anything. And so they play nice, like asking him how he's doing, try to establish a rapport. Turns out some of his family members who the cops had contacted when they were trying to find him told Lloyd to be on the lookout, so that's how he knew that they were coming to talk to him. In any case, while they're talking to him, they barely have to even say anything, because Lloyd just opens his mouth and is talking in circles, seems super cocky, he's complaining about the food, complaining about the guards at the prison, complaining about cops in general, about how much of his life has been lost due to his imprisonment, you know.
Poor, pathetic.
Right,
I know.
exactly. Like, he's such a
Little
victim,
creep,
you know?
Yeah. I always like how it's always these hardened criminals that, you know, complain
Right.
about how awful it is that, you know, they're not getting their needs met or whatever, or it's just
Right,
such horrible
exactly.
being in a cell. It's like,
It's
and
so
how do you think your
terrible.
victims felt? Because you didn't care
Right.
about that, obviously. So
Literally. Literally terrible. You know, and he blames, of course, like his parents were terrible people and they screwed him up. His whole family screwed up. It's all their fault.
Mm-hmm.
And he blames a lot of like the things he did as a young person on being young and dumb. And even worse, he complains about the state of Delaware putting on his record that he penetrated the 10-year-old girl because he only put his finger in there. Now, can we all throw up right here?
Yeah.
Like, you're really going to
Disgusting.
argue that because you did penetrate her. That's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No. He has no right to complain.
None.
No. He deserves whatever he gets in that prison cell.
Mm-hmm. He's so gross. The cops are grossed out. They're trying to, like, hold back and not throw up. But they have to keep establishing, like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, you're the victim here. Which I can't imagine. Like, after leaving his cell, like, I would need to go, like,
shower
beat someone up or something. I need to go, like, we have in our basement this guy we call Frank. It's not a real guy.
Oh, I know Frank.
I'm like, wait, I've never heard about Frank.
I know Frank.
He's like a big rubber guy that we all have boxing gloves and like we just go punch him out.
Yeah.
So I would need to take some rounds with Frank after that meeting.
Yes.
So they manage somehow, because they're all saints, to establish a rapport with this gross person and get him to sign a written consent that they can use anything he says in court. It'll be admissible in court. And he agrees as long as he's not being charged. And they're like, of course you're not being charged. But, fine print is that if he admits anything, obviously you're in trouble.
Right.
So they continue talking to Welch about his life. They talk about a woman he loved during the 70s named Helen, who had his children, which they subsequently ended up giving up their children in the 80s, I think, because they weren't good parents. Shocker.
Yeah, he was obviously not a good parent, and you hate to say something like this, but maybe they ended up in better hands than being better near him.
Because he clearly doesn't find anything wrong with what he did to the girl that was going to be a stepdaughter. So then around the Lyon's sister disappearance, they're talking to him about that time in his life, like trying to get a feel for what he was doing so that they can lead into anything he might remember about the case. And at this time, they still haven't told him that they have his statement that he made back then. They're just trying to, like, see what he's going to say. So anyways, they get to that point where they're like, do you remember this case? And he's like, I didn't kill anybody. I didn't rape anybody. I didn't do nothing to those girls. I mean, I really don't have much to tell. And then he's like, just keeps talking. And they're like, well, you don't have much to tell, but you keep talking.
You won't shut up.
Literally, what are you doing right now? So he just won't stop talking, and it's just digging himself into a deeper hole here. And guess you're just going to have to find out what happens on the next episode, because we're out of time right now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I hope we find out more about if this family finds some justice next week.
That would be really, really good if they could, because this guy's a piece of garbage.
Yeah, and I do hope that we learn that the family gets closure, because the parents are definitely, getting older, and, I would, if something like that happened to my child, like, I think the worst thing would be to die not knowing what happened to your child. I can't imagine it happening in the first place, but then to never know, actually.
It's gotta be just awful, and to think how long they've been waiting to find out, like, you have almost some hope because there's literally nothing to say that they're not coming back. But at the same time, with so much time passing and no clues, there's so much to say that they aren't.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Well, on that lovely note,
yes,
we shall talk more about this next week. Thank you, Crime Feasters, for listening to our show.
Source material about today's case can be found in our show notes.
To keep updated on the podcast, follow us on Instagram at Crime Feast Podcast,
Facebook at Crime Feast Podcast,
or Twitter at Crime Feast.
If you have a story you want shared on a Mini Bites episode,
please email us at crimefeastpodcast@gmail.com.
Until next week,
stay safe out there. We don't want you on the menu next.